Um,
Cool.
all right. Yeah, I think we're live. So, welcome to our sixth episode of Making It in America. And this is a special episode. I'm basically catching up with an old friend with whom I worked briefly. We'll go through the story later on. But for those who doesn't know Ade is basically the co-founder and president of Moving Analytics, which is a telehealth company which helps people to thrive after heart disease. I want to hear more about that, but I'm gonna just give a brief of Ade first. And Ade is also like a part-time lecturer of entrepreneurship at USC, and he's the founder of Multicultural Angel Investor Network, which is basically a nonprofit which is dedicated to promote angel investing in multicultural professionals. Adi grew up in Laos, Nigeria, and then he moved to US for his undergrad in University of Houston, and then he finished his master's from USC, and then he was recently recognized as the top 30 under 30 in healthcare by Forbes magazine. So congrats on that, Ade.
Wow, man. Who are you talking about?
And thanks a lot for joining. My first question is like, how have you been, man? Like, it's been so long. It's been more than 4 or 5 years. How have you been overall?
Yeah, man, I'm good. Just been busy with trying to, get the business up and established. Um, I had a very crazy experience in immigration that we should talk about on
For
this podcast because I feel like a lot of people will be very entertained by the story, but they will also probably learn something different from that experience. And yeah, just trying to do life. So I keep like saying I'm busy, and then I keep getting involved in all these different projects. It's like, but all in all, I've been pretty good. Yeah, man, it's been crazy. I remember like working with you at U of H, and I remember one time we broke some lab equipment. I'd like.
Oh my God! Yeah, you just oh, so you knew about that. So you basically were you knew about you are the only person I think in the whole world who knows about that now. Now it's like a lot of people, but anyway. So
Yeah.
and I did you know that I actually like just to not let our advisor like Brankovic know, I actually bought like I bought out of my own pocket a replacement of that. I didn't let him know because my relationship was already so bad with it. Anyway, like this.
I remember.
Oh my God! Okay, you know some of my like secrets then. Anyway, so
Yep.
but good to know. Like it's good, really good catching up with you. I think last time we met was in LA. Did we meet up in an Ethiopian restaurant or something like that? I'm trying.
Yeah, we did. I think we went with my brother.
Right, you and your brother. You and your brother. Were you doing your masters that time, or like what was going on?
Yeah, I was in my master's at USC. I was also working at USC too.
Okay, got it. So like I'm thinking like where do we start? I basically want to start in your like from your like origin story. Like you're from Nigeria. Give us a little bit background on like how like where you grew up. I mean, I want to know like from the baby Ade. Like obviously, Ade.
That's great way back in time. But yeah, so I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria.
Yeah.
Lagos is our version of New York City. So Nigeria has 180 million people, and 30 million of them live in Lagos. And so Lagos is a very small city with 30 million people, and so it's pretty crazy. The traffic, like LA and New York traffic, don't have anything of Lagos traffic. But one of the interesting parts of growing up is that my dad is also an engineer and an entrepreneur, and he started his first company when I was 3 years old in our 3-bedroom apartment. So essentially, we slept in one room, and then the rest of the apartment was the office. And so I started using computers because of my dad would he essentially gave me a computer to play Prison Pressure so that I wouldn't disturb him. And so that's kind of how I got into computers and I got interested in technology. Went to high school in Nigeria. I went to boarding school. So I went when I was 10 years old. And so that's a very interesting experience because I feel like I at 10 years old, I had to figure out, like, I had to wake up every day at 6:30 in the morning, you know, take care of myself, do all my personal hygiene, know when to study. So I feel like that kind of really made me grow up a lot. And when it was time to come to America, I had like lived by myself for 6 years essentially, all through junior high and senior high. So it was moving further away from home, but I was already like a pretty independent person. And so I feel like that helped a lot, just like personal development. In high school, I always thought I wanted to be like an engineer. Because I guess my dad was an engineer. I had a very big interest for technology. But when I look back at it now, I noticed that I was not very interested in like how this stuff worked, but I was more interested in how to sell it and how to like present it and how to get people that were not technical to be excited about technology. And so when it was time to go to school, my dad was like, hey, I applied to like 5 different schools in the US. And he was like, "Where do you want to go to school?" And I'm like, "Where's the warmest?" And he was like, "Houston, Texas." I was like, "Yes, let's go." Because I had watched too many Hollywood movies, and on the movies you see kind of like the snow and the cold, and I'm like, man, that's not for me. Nigeria is on the equator, so it's like on average like 100 degrees all year long. So it's like
it's like Bangladesh, probably. It's
essentially. So I ended up choosing Houston, and then I decided to study electrical engineering. Because my dad was an electrical engineer too, so I was kind of going that footstep. But into just the whole program, I was doing well in the school, but I kind of noticed that I wasn't too interested in like soldering, semiconductors or writing code. I was more like, hey, how do we start something big? How do you start like a big idea? And so that's kind of where I got into entrepreneurship and stuff. So I think that's kind of obviously summarizing a lot of things, but that's kind of my journey like to America.
Okay, so basically, I mean that's and like once you came in, did you have friends or like anyone, or you're like mostly by yourself thinking?
Mostly by myself. So my dad had some business partners that ended up becoming like my guardians, here in the US. But the name of his business partner is Ron Emberg and his wife Susan. Both of them were white Americans, and they were like very, very nice to me. Like they really helped me transition from Nigeria here. I didn't have friends that were my age, and I remember my first day on campus. And University of Houston is, I think, the most diverse, or like the top 2 most diverse campuses in college in the US. And I remember the first day on campus, like getting out of the dorm and like just closing the door because of like I had just never seen that many variation of human color. There's like whites and blacks and like Asians and like Bangladesh and Indian, and it's like it was a lot. I was like, what the hell? So that was like a very interesting experience. But so initially it was overwhelming, but with time, just kind of going to class and getting involved in all the different studying groups, really got to really appreciate that diversity in cultures, because you can just try different food, learn how people do different things, and you kind of learn that like you're different in a lot of ways, but you're very similar in a lot of ways. So that was like a very wonderful experience. So a lot of people don't know this, but Houston is like second Nigeria. There's like a ton of Nigerians in Houston. At your age, there's probably like 1,000 Nigerian students.
I knew that.
Yeah, and I used to be the president of the Nigerian Student Club. So it's just, after the first year, it was just pretty easy to like exist because of like there's just lots of Nigerians there, lots of Nigerian food. So it was just pretty nice.
No, that's I think you are the person who actually told me that Houston was the second largest base of Nigerian, and then after you said that, I was like, oh yeah, there are actually a lot of Nigerians in Houston, like big neighborhoods which are just all like very predominantly Nigerian. So yeah, Houston. And so when I met you, I'm trying to remember, were you in your 3rd year of your undergrad, like junior, senior? Where were you exactly?
I think we probably met sophomore year going into junior year.
Okay.
So I think my 2nd year, I didn't even know how I met Dr. Brankovic.
How did you land up in like Dr. Brankovich's lab?
Yeah, I'm actually blanking, and I'm trying to remember how that happened. Huh?
For
Like,
for for those
I
who,
have
yeah, go.
I have no clue. To be honest, I just know that I was looking for like a summer job,
Okay,
and I
right,
was
right.
trying to do
Yeah,
something I was trying to get some research experience.
yeah.
So, man, I need to go back and think about how I met Dr. Brankovic. Somehow, I got connected with Dr. Brankovic, and
Yeah.
he was doing research in semiconductors and nanotechnology, and um, he introduced me to Borhan, who was like one of his master's students then.
Yeah,
And so I was supposed to be Borhan's assistant and kind of doing a lot of the experiments. So that's where we met.
yeah. Just a little bit of background to the audience. Basically, I know Ade from we had the same, I would say, like supervisor, like lab supervisor. Like for me, I was doing my master, so he was my thesis supervisor. Ade, basically, as you just said, I think like you actually got in there for your summer internship kind of gig, um,
Yeah.
and yeah. So basically, so you found Brankovic, and then yeah, I remember like the first time when you came, I'm like, oh, Brankovic said that okay, like this guy is gonna help you with like with your like basically the research I was doing, that like the annealing of like thin film. So I'm so far up from like fabrication and IC fabrication now. Like I have no idea what's going on in that world.
Yeah,
Um,
dude, same here.
but anyway, so and then how long were you there? Like 1 year or like more? 1.5 years?
I was there for like pretty much 2.5 years actually. So I did that up until graduating.
Mm.
And I remember that one of the interesting conversations I had with Dr. Barkovic was he actually offered me, a sport, if I was going to do a master's, that he was going to kind of sponsor me to do a master's if I stayed
Yeah.
with him. And I
Yeah.
was like, sorry, I can't.
Right.
And
Yeah.
for me, that decision was interesting because, the research was exciting and stuff.
Mm.
But when I looked in the lab and I looked at everybody in the lab, I was like, do you want to be like any of these people going to grow up? And I was like, no. So that for me was like a pretty easy decision. So it's like the research was cool. It helped me get a lot of like scholarships and international waivers that helped school wise. But
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
I didn't want to mix chemicals for the rest of my life. So
Yeah. No, the same for me, man. Like I think like in the beginning I started with a very high hope, and then I also started losing interest. Like it was so painful. I actually honestly thought that I'll quit in the middle of my master's, but anyway, that's a different story. So then you basically moved to USC. Like out of like, how did you choose USC for your master? Like why?
yeah. So one of the things I did my junior year going to senior year was so I had this group of friends at U of H, and we're all in engineering, we're all
Mm.
Nigerian, and we all loved like technology. So every day we meet up and we're just always like, this is when the iPhone came out. So we'll always be
Yeah.
debating like Microsoft versus Apple. I think there was like the Microsoft Zoom back there was like an MP3 versus the iPod Touch. And so we used to argue, like spend hours like literally debating technology.
Yeah.
And then the social network movie came out,
Okay.
and we all went to see it together. And after that experience, I was like, you know what, like guys, we need to stop talking and we need to build something.
Yeah.
So we started kind of like playing around with like what ideas we could work on, and we eventually settled on this idea of like essentially like when we're at your age, every semester you go to the bookstore, you buy a book for like $120, and then you use the book, and then at the end of the semester, the bookstore would buy it back from you for like $40, and then they'll sell it the following semester for 80, and we're like, that's a crime, right? Like, so
Mhm.
like there has to be an efficient way to get people on campus to like buy and sell stuff to each other. And then as we thought about it more, we're like, man, this is even a bigger idea in terms of on campus. There are a lot of people that have mutual interests as you, but you really don't know, right? You could be walking past someone that maybe has a textbook for a class that you're about to take, and has all the like notes and all the tests. So we're like, we should build a platform that will allow people on campus to give, trade, and connect. So we called it Gift House, and we ended up like doing the mock-ups, and we're all engineers, but we didn't know how to write code.
Yeah.
And so one of the guys on the team was like, hey, you know, like my pastor at church is actually like a developer. So why don't we go and talk to him about the idea? So we all hopped in the car. We went to Spring, Texas. And then we told him about the idea. And it was like, this is a really good idea, man. You know, I think he said, it's not going to be too hard to build. And we're like, once we heard that, we're like, hey, can you build this? And so we convinced this guy to start building the website, like same day. Like, so he literally like started creating a database. So we built the site and we launched it, I think, October 2010 at U of H.
In U of H, like all these things started in U of H. Like
in U of H, yeah. Okay, so this is junior year. By the way, like I'm an electrical engineering major.
Yeah.
Going through like junior year, which is like super hard. I am doing research with you and Dr. Bakovic.
Yeah.
I am the president of the Nigerian club, and then I started this startup. It couldn't be worse. But the so we to launch. So I think we launched the platform fall of 2010, and part of our launch strategy is we made like 500 t-shirts that had like Gift House. And we made like a bunch of like flyers. And so first day of school, we're like giving away t-shirts. And we're like, hey, you know, like you can use, we were pretty much in front of the bookstore. And we're like, hey, like don't buy a book from the bookstore, go gifthouse.com. You can buy or sell a book from someone else. And it took off. We had like 3,500 users the first semester. So it was huge. Like lots of people were like signing up. The highlight of that experience was someone sold their Ford Mustang on the platform. So that's like super exciting to see that.
So how, like, who was the funding? Who, you guys are funding it by yourself, or?
Yeah, we're funded by ourselves. Like essentially, like this pastor is like building the tech, and then we're doing the marketing until we funded it by ourselves. And so that was interesting. You know, we had a good number of users and good engagement at University of Houston. Well, we made a few mistakes. One was like we only allowed people that had a .edu to sign up. And so a lot of people actually, that caused a lot of friction, you know, because we wanted to be safe, to just be students alone. And we're finding that like when we tried to go from U of H to like TSU or UT Austin. We couldn't really scale well because a lot of people didn't know that .edu. So that was kind of one mistake I think we made. And then we got the opportunity to pitch at South by Southwest. And I think we pitched the same year Lyft launch. So I remember that competition. It was like a competition at South by Southwest. And like, I definitely remember meeting the founder of Lyft, and they were pitching like Lyft then. And I was like, man, this is such a like crappy idea. Like, our ideas way better. But the interesting thing from South by Southwest was we got like a lot of investor interest. But all the different investors wanted us to kind of do different things. So one wanted us to focus on the college market. Some thought like we could be like a Craigslist killer, you know. So everybody just had a different directions. And then at this point, I had graduated by this point, and me and all the partners were working on this, but we're not making any money. And so everyone started to have different ideas of how to take things. And we're 5 partners. And, you know, after a while, it's like we couldn't just all agree on like the direction of the company. And we're all friends. So there was like not one like major decision maker. So it got to a point where we're just pretty much debating every day, like what should be the focus. And at this point, my dad was like, hey, like what's next? And I was like, you know, I'm building this startup. And he was like, I'm going to give you a check for 6 months. And so in 6 months, you either figure out the startup and get it funded, you get a job, or you go back to grad school. So 3 months into the check, I was like, this is not going anywhere. So I was like, I want to go to grad school. So I felt like at that point, I didn't want to be an engineer because at least in Houston back then, engineers got to work for the oil companies like ExxonMobil, and most of my friends were getting those jobs, and they were making a ton of money. And it was like, man, like, what are you doing? Like, you're doing a startup. Well, I knew I wanted to get more into like Silicon Valley startups, so I wanted to kind of transition. So I said it'd be good to get a master's in like engineering management, so that I can be more on the business side of engineering. And I also kind of wanted to get into like the whole startup ecosystem. So I was like, let me see what schools were in California. So USC, this is University of Southern California, had a master's in engineering management, but they also had this job in their technology transfer office where they were looking for someone that had some startup experience to work with professors who had patents that wanted to commercialize those patents into startups. So they wanted to take that patent and make it a startup company. So they were looking for someone that was going to help with doing a lot of market research, helping the researchers find entrepreneurial mentors who had done something similar before, help them raise venture capital, help them find a CEO, because a lot of professors, they're like tenured and they kind of want to leave the tenured lifestyle, they don't want to start a company. So I applied for both the job and the school, and I got into both of them. I never been to California before, never been to LA. I paid a company to drive my car from Houston to LAX, and I flew to LAX, and I literally flew to LAX, and I got my keys on the guy, and that's kind of how I got to California. So that was a pretty crazy experience. Boy.
When was it? Which year was it?
I moved to LA 2012, so summer 2012.
Summer 2012. So by the time, actually, it's so like we went to LA in such a close time. So you went to in summer 2012. I went there in summer 2013, which is just like 1 year later after you. So okay. So and then basically you are doing this masters. It's a great thing that like now I can like have a more, because the last time I saw you, you're doing your masters, and then I have like a huge like empty spot. Like I have no idea what went. I think your masters definitely probably like gave you a more like you can only connect the dots in the back. Like it's a very cliche thing to say. It's so funny to see those things.
Hindsight is 2020.
Absolutely. So basically, like you're doing this masters where you are probably getting more idea of how the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem works, and then how did you come up with your next like? How did you come up on what's your own? Like, how did you come up with movie analytics from there?
Sure. I think, so going from like having a startup in undergrad and then going to grad school and quitting the startup was actually very hard. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. It was a very depressing time because, when you're doing a startup, you're on cloud nine, right? Like all your energies, you're super pumped.
I know.
Lots of like adrenaline, like you get all this recognition, you know, and then you go and like you're not a student, essentially go to school, like everybody else, and that was very tough, personally for me. And then coupled with the fact that I was in LA, I didn't know anybody in LA. Just my brother also moved to LA he moved to LA from Nigeria at the same time. And so I knew my brother, so I was working at this job at USC from pretty much 9 to 5, and then from 6 to 10 I was in class, and so I felt like I didn't spend enough time at work to make friends, not spend enough time in class to make friends. So it's just not a very fun time. Well, I actually really enjoyed the job. The job was like the best experience I had to that point, because I got to work with different really brilliant professors. So I got in like one professor developed this like artificial retina. So pretty much like an artificial retina that you put into the eyes of someone else blind, and that person could see black and white. And you had to figure out like a business model for that. Or another person had like for this prosthetics. A lot of prosthetics can like grab and make it feel, and they have like a lot of dexterity, but they don't have the sense of touch. So he created like these caps that you put on the fingers that could actually give like the robots a sense of like feeling. And like I think one of the lotion companies, so she's actually using the robots with those caps to actually figure out the texture of like the creams. So we also had to figure out like a business model for that, like worked on stuff like nanotechnology. So got exposed to like lots of great ideas, got exposed to lots of venture capitalists, lots of like entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things that kind of struck me through that process was like, man, these guys like are brilliant, but like they only have one head. Like, like I felt like I was as good or as smart as them. So I was like, man, I started kind of thinking about what I want to do next. Luckily for me, one of the projects I got to work on it ended up becoming my company, Media Analytics. So there was this postdoc at USC who had gotten a patent around using smartphones to track how much calories someone burnt while they exercised. And then he also got another patent around big data models for motivating people to exercise. So essentially, he was building this app that could track exercise, but also motivate people to exercise. And so he came to me and said, this is what I'm trying to do in my patent. He said, smoking is the next, sitting and being sedentary is the next smoking. And he was trying to solve that problem. The interesting thing was at this time, this is when Fitbit was starting to get popular. There was like Map My Fitness, Map My Run. All these apps were coming out of the fitness space and they were getting a lot of traction. And I felt like, what we had then wasn't very differentiated. So I said, why don't we go try and figure out in healthcare, what medical condition will someone die if they don't exercise? Like, where's the most important need for exercise that if we could build a solution around, would really be able to create a lot of value in an enterprise perspective versus an consumer perspective, because the consumer market is very crowded. So both of us were like, we don't know the answer, but let's go talk to doctors. So we went to USC. Fortunately for us, USC had a medical school. So we went on the website, found like different doctors, and we were emailing them and said, hey, we're grad students. We know how to track exercise very well, but we're trying to find, a clinical application for exercise in healthcare. And so we're talking to different clinicians, and they're telling us about, essentially in chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease, exercise is very important in preventing, like for example, a heart attack. But it's also very important after someone's had like, a heart attack or has diabetes. Exercise is a very important piece in managing that condition so that people can have a good quality of life. And so we kind of knew there was something there, but we were not very sure. But fortunately for us at that time as well, we got into this program by the National Science Foundation called the NSF ICOR. And so the ICOR program is a program that essentially for research that the government funds, if the PI and the students wanted to explore building a company around that research, the NSF gave you a grant for $50,000 to go talk to potential customers. And they also taught you how to do what you call customer discovery. So customer discovery is like essentially going out there and going to people you think may be customers and saying, hey, we have this technology, but we're trying to find like is a problem we can solve. So they kind of taught us how to do that, and they give us $50,000 to go travel essentially across the country to customer interviews. And so we got into that program, and that really gave us like, that was really helpful, but because it took us from being like essentially nerds that were like in a lab to where to talk to people. So we interviewed about like 100 people as part of this program. And we're trying to still find like a solution for our technology. And one of the people that I met was someone from the American Heart Association as an event. And I introduced myself and I said, hey, I'm working at USC. I have this technology around exercise. And he was like, hey, I work with the American Heart Association and we do a lot of initiatives to promote exercise. So it's like, why don't we find a way to collaborate? So I was like, sure. So I sent him like some ideas, and then he sent it to the headquarters, and they came back to us and said, hey, we spend a lot of money advocating for people after heart attacks to do what you call cardiac rehab, but nobody's doing it because of there's not enough rehab centers, and we think that telehealth has a role to play in increasing access. So they were applying for an NIH grant to investigate telehealth or telecardiac rehab. And they wanted us to build a platform for them because we had this expertise. So we worked with them to apply for the grant. They eventually didn't get the grant, but we're like, hey, what's this cardiac rehab thing anyways? Like, let's go investigate it. So we started doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of rehab centers. And what we learned was essentially after a heart attack, it's very important for people to do cardiac rehab, because in cardiac rehab, essentially they help the patient understand what caused the heart attack in the first place and how to change their behaviors so that they don't get a second heart attack. So in cardiac rehab, the patients will get education around their diet, if they're smokers, how to quit smoking, how to manage their hypertension, their cholesterol. And the way it works is the patient is supposed to go to a rehab center 3 times a week for 12 weeks. The problem is that there are very few rehab centers that are close enough to people's home or work. And so there's just not enough programs for patients to go to. So the national average is that like only 20% of people in the US do cardiac rehab. And so we're like, wow, like this is such a big opportunity. So that's kind of how we found like this idea from V Analytics. So we're like, it'd be great for us to find a way to do cardiac rehab at home. And so we started doing a lot of research in terms of who's done cardiac rehab at home. And then we found that at Stanford, they had done a lot of research in home-based cardiac rehab. And they had developed a model that was very successful. And we're like, man, I literally called the Stanford team. I said, hey, my pitch then was like, hey, we're grad students at USC. We're building an app for cardiac rehab, but we don't have a clue what cardiac rehab is. So it's like, can you tell me what you do, what your research is about, and how does your home-based cardiac rehab model work? And the more we talked to them, we found that they had like a very, very solid home-based program. Well, it's very old school. So essentially in their own model, after a heart attack, they'll give the patient like a binder. That's this thick. And the binder had instructions for everything they needed to do every day, including like recording their weights, their blood pressure, their heart rate, recording like what the food they ate. And once a week, you can also call the patient and say, hey, so Siam, what did you do this week? And then based on information, the nurse will kind of figure out like how to coach the patients. So we're like, we can totally digitize this process, right? Where we can create an app for the patients. The app would connect to like an Apple Watch, a blood pressure cuff, a scale. A nurse will have a dashboard where they can see all the data, and we can make it very efficient to do this. So we ended up building a relationship with the Stanford team. And then in 2015, we licensed their research. And then they were retiring. So it's like, why don't you guys come join us if you're going to retire anyways? So we recruited the cardiologist, a nurse, and a project manager from Stanford into the company. And then we went to go raise venture capital. So we raised $1.5 million. And that's kind of how we got into business. So.
And so basically, I mean, this is a great timing. I think like first I realized that like, was it predominant that the health? So you're saying before that when you are doing that job where you come up for different startups, like was it predominantly health based? Because I think like that, or like it was all like in all domain.
Yeah, it was all domain, but there were things that had like very strong intellectual property. So I did some things in healthcare, some things in like cells, some things in games, educational games. Like it was just pretty wide gamut. But the healthcare opportunity was very attractive.
And then from that, you met your co-founder, who is basically one of your co-founders of, and then basically. I mean, yeah, it went from there. So, like, my question is, I want to hear more. I have one question. Like, while this is more like an exploration, right? Like, you're exploring all these things. Like, each things came one after another. Did you ever think that it would actually form a company, or you're just having fun on the process of exploration?
Yeah, initially I was just having fun. Like I just kind of seen, just learning a lot about new technologies and new industries. One of the things I noticed while I was doing that job was professors, it's almost impossible for them to become entrepreneurs just
Yeah.
because they didn't have the skin in the game. They're already tenured, they already had a cushy job. And so they wanted to be more like chief technology officers at best,
At best.
or technical advisors. And, it's very hard for someone who didn't invent the idea to come in and take that idea and become a CEO, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that struck me was my co-founder Harsh now was very bent on not becoming an academic. So it's like, Ade, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to be an academic. And I said, hey, I don't think we had the right idea, but this is a very brilliant guy. And if he's like focuses on this, we'll figure out something. So for me, that was kind of like when I was like, okay, this is a real opportunity to do something. So, I had been doing a lot of research for him on the business side. And then the more we kind of like, I was giving him a lot of ideas. Both of us just were getting very excited about the opportunity. That was like, hey, like, why don't we work on this together outside of my job at USC back then? And I think one of the interesting things we did and how we structured our relationship was, it was very helpful because what we did essentially was, I started out as a consultant to him. I said, hey, I'm going to figure out a market for your technology.
Right.
And so we had essentially like a contract where I helped him to explore different options.
Yeah.
And every 3 months, we'll kind of like set a milestone, figure out how many hours he needed from me, and I would do that. So we did the first contract, he paid me cash. Did the second contract, he paid me cash. And then just by doing those short contracts, it really helped me to get to know him better and helped him to get to know me better. And we like that working relationship. So by the third contract, we're like, okay, he was like, I really want you to work with me on this like full time. What's it going to take? And so we started talking about equity. And so sometimes like, when you start a company, it's really hard to figure out like who should get what, or like knowing like who's the right person to join your team. And sometimes someone starts with you, but then they leave and they had to figure out what to do with the equity. I feel like I just learned, and we've kind of taken this and applied it to our company. We never hire anybody like full time directly. We'll always start with a project. It's like a small project that we can do within 3 months. We allow both of us to get a feel for that relationship. And then from there, we can then graduate that into like a longer term engagement. And so that's something I feel like we did well. Just really helped us ease into that relationship, versus just like, hey, you're not my co-founder. So that's kind of that transition.
Yeah. Fast, and also like I think you guys also entered the market in a very interesting time for telehealth, because like mobile phones, and healthcare, health mobile was just kind of probably 2013, 14. Those was like the best golden era to enter that market. So that was also like a great.
I think one concern we had when we started was, cardiac rehab obviously is an older person's disease. So how many people are using smartphones? How many other people are using smartphones? That was a concern. Now it's like 70% of our patients already have a tablet or a smartphone, and it's not more of a concern. But when we started, we actually formed the company in 2013, actually. That's when we formed the company. That was not when we launched the product, or just when we officially formed the company. And back then, like, it's in a smartphone penetration in that demographic was probably like 30%. So, it's kind of like a risk, at that time, but it's kind of played out because the market is not very saturated.
Yeah. So what is the like situation? What are you guys doing right now? And what is the stage you are in terms of moving analytics? Where is it right
now? Right now we have a product on the market. We're in about 20 health systems. We work with the VA, so the Veterans Affairs, that's the health system that manages all the veterans. And that's very exciting because, obviously they're veterans and they've served the country, but you also get to help them, with healthcare. So in 6 VAs, we work with health systems like NYU, Emory, Stanford, UCSF, a lot of the top academic medical centers. We also just signed our first health plan. So Highmark Health Plan is the Blue Cross plan in Pittsburgh. So our products on the market this year will serve about 2,000 patients. So it's been very exciting. Just really taking something from your head and now you go to a hospital and then cardiologists are using your product and patients are using your product. You're just like, wow, this is happening. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, that's definitely exciting. What is what are your, I would say, I guess, I mean, you probably also grew, definitely you're growing as the startup is growing, your role is changing, you're learning a lot of things. How what excites you right now to go to do the thing? Obviously it's different than 5 years back, it was big.
Sure.
Yeah, what's the
I think 5 years ago, it was just I wanted to get back into another startup. And so just finding a new idea was interesting. And then also, having an idea that was strong enough where you can actually talk to venture capitalists and they'll take you seriously is that was super cool. I think initially you get excited about talking to VCs because oh, these guys are they feel like God. Now I don't like talking to them anymore. But now I think what's really exciting is just the mission, in terms of heart disease is the leading cause of death globally. And so we have a product that, is meeting people that are fortunate enough to survive things like a heart attack and helping them through that first 6 months of that experience. And there's a lot of people that feel like they almost died. And so they're very scared. They're very they don't know if they can eat a cheeseburger or go on a run.
Yeah.
Their heart is going to burst open. And we have the opportunity to work with them and say, hey, it's going to be okay. If you follow the steps, you actually can get healthier than you were before the heart attack. And a lot of people actually think they're going to die. And it's no, you're going to be fine. And so just having the opportunity to do that, I think what excites me now is just how many people can we get this into the hands of? So it's just how do we grow up, do we scale? And our mission as a company is to serve 1 million people a year. So that's what we want to do. So it's just thinking about that on a day-to-day basis in terms of, I think one of the challenging things in healthcare is that it's so regulated. So I think being a first-time founder was helpful in starting this company because we didn't know what we were getting into. And if we knew when we were starting the company. So at first it was okay, we need to build a product that patients would like.
Yeah.
And then you figure out okay, you build the patient-facing side, but to get to the patients, you need to go to the hospital. So you have to build the hospital interface. And then you build a hospital interface, and then you try and sell it, and then you figure out that hospitals only use things that the insurance companies pay for.
Yeah.
And then you have to then go talk to insurance companies and then build more requirements for the insurance side into the product. So over the last couple of years, it's kind of been just learning healthcare and the business of healthcare, and then building a product that kind of touches on stakeholders. And I think now we're at a point where we now understand the game we're playing. And so we're starting to sign really big customers and really big contracts, and we now have a pretty clear strategy in terms of what we need to do. So that's been a process, but it's been good.
Absolutely. What are the challenges you guys are seeing in upcoming years or some recent times?
So I had a very crazy immigration experience. So I came from Nigeria, right? And I was an F1, and then I went from F1 to OPT, right? And because of I studied STEM, I got the extension.
Right.
So the extension. So within the extension, a lot of people don't know that you can actually start a company.
Sure.
On OPT. Yeah. So started the company, did the extension, raised venture capital,
Yeah.
And then right after we raised our first round, this is 1.5 million, and my first board meeting with my investors, and then my lawyer calls me and it's like, Ade, are you sitting down? I was like, yeah, what's going on? She's like, you had 15 days to leave the country. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So pretty much I had applied for the H1B, and that's through the company, right, through the startup.
Mm.
And I actually got selected in the lottery process, right? That's the hardest part, right? Getting through the lottery. Because there's like 200,000 applicants, and then there's 60,000, spots, and then the computer chooses who. So I got through the lottery.
Yeah.
But the next step from there is like an immigration officer reviews your application.
Right.
So my officer said, I studied electrical engineering and engineering management, and I am starting a company.
Yeah.
And there's no correlation between my degree and my job. So he denied my application.
Yeah.
And at this point, I only had 15 days left in my OPT. So I literally had to fly back home. And I was like, what the hell? Like, what are my options? And my lawyer was like, oh, you have 15 days to leave. And I was like, I don't pay you to tell me I have 15 days. Like, we need to figure out a way. I ended up having to go back to school because that was just the only way for me to stay. So I appealed the decision, but it's going to take 8 months for them to even read the appeal.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to school. But if you go back to school, then you're F1 and you have to be a full-time student that you can't work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I then had to fire myself from the company, become a full-time student. UCLA, I was like, what I want to study now. One day I want to become a venture capitalist. So I said, let me go study finance and mergers and acquisitions. So I got a certificate in finance. And then UCLA allowed us to do internships after we take 5 classes. So you had to take 5 classes and get credits in 5 classes.
Okay.
So my first semester, I'm taking 5 classes.
Yeah.
I am not on payroll, but I'm still obviously involved in the company, right? And then I had to hire people to help me do my job.
Yeah.
So, and then I am also figuring out my next immigration move, applying for green cards, appealing like my decision, trying to do another H1B. The worst time ever. Like, it's insane. Like, my investors are like, hey, we just gave you guys $1.5 million, and like you're telling us that like you guys have to like go back to like your country, like what the hell? So it was a very tough time, but this was 2017. So this was from July to December 2017. So after my first semester at UCLA, I could do an internship. So I went to my professor and said, hey, I got this offer from this startup in LA. They offered for me to come and become a business development intern. So I got my business partner to write me an internship letter. And I took that to UCLA, and then UCLA approved me to become an intern at my own company. So I came back to my company. And so, like, by doing that, I could get back on payroll. But eventually, I was able to get a green card through the national interest waiver. So the national interest waiver is a special kind of green card for people whose work is in the interest of the country. Yeah. And so because of my work is in healthcare, I essentially had to get 9 recommendation letters from the American Heart Association, the American Society of Cardiac Rehab. Different of my customers wrote me letters essentially saying, Ade is a genius and he needs to be in the US because of like, we need to solve this problem in cardiac rehab. So that's how I eventually got my green card. But that was like a horrible experience, I guess.
It's so funny, like how much roundabout like international students have to go through. This wasn't even 2017, is just 2 years back, and you were like, moving analytics was probably already in a decent stage, but you were going through all these things that like, and I don't know how did you convince the investors? Like, what did the investors say you that, hey, like, what's your
I think we have very good investors that were very supportive and understanding.
That's good.
That was definitely a blessing, because I was very worried about like, are they going to kick me out of the company? It was very scary, but they were very supportive. I think they actually helped us find like a good immigration lawyer. And it was just more communicating what's going on. Like, hey, this is the plan. I'm hiring two people to help me with my job because I'm distracted now. And so it wasn't the best situation, but they were pretty understanding. So
yeah, and this is like the last part of your story is more like a like a true American immigrant story where people of like America basically doesn't want you to go, so they wrote like recommendations for you that okay, I go leave this country. Like you have to go through convincing this old system that you are valuable here. Like this is
yeah,
just ridiculous. But anyway, like I hope that this will.
yeah. I'm like sometimes I'm like if the only thing I get out of this startup is a green card, it's pretty worth it.
So when did you get your green card? Last year?
Last November.
Last okay. Congrats, man. Like it's a big load off your mind. I like only you and I can probably know that. So
Yeah. Like I guess your audience too, because they're probably international students. Yeah. That's. I mean, now like you can now focus 100% on business versus like I was taking classes and like trying to do on the business is hard.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about this. Like, is this a new thing you started, the Multicultural Angel Investor Network? And tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah. So being an immigrant, right, and being like a person of color in the U.S. And having had the privilege to start a company and raise venture capital, almost every day someone is reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to raise money from venture capitalists. Like, can you introduce me to venture capitalists in your network?" And my feedback to them was usually like, "Okay, so have you built a product? Do you have customers?" And a lot of people, just because of venture capital is so popular now, everybody thinks like they need to get a VC investment, and they don't realize that there's stages to capital. So when you start out, the people the first person that invests in your business is you, right? Or your friends or your family, right? Those are the first set of investors. And then the next set of investors are things like the accelerators and incubators. And the next set of investors are then like the angel investors. And then you eventually go to venture capitalists. This is more true for first-time entrepreneurs, right? Which most immigrants would be. But the problem I think that we have in the immigrant community is that the people who tend to angel invest, who write the $100,000 to $500,000 checks, are white men, right? And a lot of times they invest in people they know, right? So their friend's kid that went to Stanford, is working on an idea, sure, they write a check, right? But you're Siam from Bangladesh, like,
no,
I don't know you from Adam, right? And you're also probably working on a problem that like may make sense for a lot of Bangladeshi people, but doesn't make sense for like, American, right? And so you find that like there's this like lack of like diversity in tech because of the investors who typically invest do not understand they don't have immigrants and people from multicultural backgrounds in their networks, and they also don't understand the nuances of those problems. But on the flip side, you then have to ask the question, okay, are there immigrants who are successful who can be investors? And the answer is yes, right? They're like doctors, engineers, lawyers, athletes, very successful people.
Absolutely.
But they don't invest in tech, right? And they don't invest in startups. And that's a big gap, right? Because they are the ones who can relate to these problems, that can relate to these entrepreneurs. And so I started the Multicultural Angel Investor Network because I felt like there's a big opportunity to take the existing base of multicultural professionals who have, they have disposable income that they can invest. They have an expertise, right? And they have a huge network. And it's like, how do you actually teach those people about technology as an asset class and how to invest in startup companies so that when they have, their friend's son who's working on a new idea, do they know how to engage that person and support them and give them the right amount of capital, introduce them to people in their network, use the expertise to guide that person. So the goal of the Multicultural Angel Investing Network is really to create a culture of angel investing amongst multicultural professionals. And the way we achieve that is we do monthly events in Los Angeles and San Francisco, where we do like either like workshops, boot camps, panel discussions, where we get other multicultural professionals who are investing to kind of talk about their experience so that people actually are exposed to the idea. And we're also planning an angel accelerator. Essentially, it's kind of like a startup accelerator, but for angel investors, where they get to get some coaching around how to invest. They also get to put some money into like a common fund, and then they get to do due diligence on startups. So we kind of are hand holding them through their first investment. So that's what we're doing with the fund.
No, that's. And when did you start? Last year or?
I started that actually this year.
This year, okay.
So we've done about, I think, 6 events so far, and so it's been super exciting.
That's great. Like I really appreciate that you're like, obviously it's probably like in all immigrants, but I appreciate you specifically because this is actually like you're actually giving back to the community. This is something which will empower the community. There are so many immigrants, I mean, who need like this kind of support network, like guidance from people who have gone through it. But that's a great project you started.
Hey, thanks, man. I think what things you learn as an entrepreneur is that like entrepreneurs live and die by like mentors who kind of introduce you and connect you and kind of just take out the time, even though like you don't deserve it.
Absolutely.
And so I find that any entrepreneur who's really essentially for people who've created something from nothing and they've had a lot of people who've paved the way and really paid it forward. And so it's just natural for you to want to do these things because of like you also want to help the next people come. Right? So it's just kind of a way to give back because of like a lot of people have been very generous to you.
Absolutely.
I couldn't pay back all the favors that people have given me. So this is kind of my own way of like, hopefully paying me forward for the next generation.
That's great. I'm looking forward to both of your projects, but mostly this one because this has some overlap on my interest because I also want to empower the international students. I'm sure that America like probably will eventually understand that immigration is the most important superpower America have right now to like retain its like position in the world. I would say so being friendly towards immigrant will only benefit this country. Like if anyone. But
yeah, I think it's very interesting, that perspective because so with the new administration, right? There's this whole America first or America only. Don't care about immigrants. And when you think about the immigrants in America's contribution to the US, we do the hardest things, right? On both sides of the spectrum. So on the low end of the spectrum, right? Where the gardeners, the janitors, the cleaners, we do all the odd jobs, right?
Yeah.
We don't care, right? We're like,
okay.
there's money to be made, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
On the high end of the spectrum, think about when we're doing research at U of H. There was no one American in that lab, right?
Yeah. Not even
on that whole floor, maybe there was one. I think there was like 2 guys from like the superconductor conductivity lab.
Yeah.
Same thing in grad school, right? Like Asians were like, when I went to USC, 40% of my class was Chinese, 40% was Indian, and then there was like me, the black guy, one white guy, some guys from Saudi, and that's the class. So it's like, so when you think about that, like we're doing like the hardest things, and people talk about like, immigrants taking jobs away. I'm like, we do the jobs that most Americans don't want to do, and it's kind of interesting, where it's like, okay, like the solution is actually how do you get more people to be interested in these jobs versus like kind of victimizing like immigrants and
that's great, man. I'm looking forward to that. So what's like I would say like what is do you have any more interesting side projects going on, or like what are you looking forward to in next couple of years? Like what are you excited about except what you're doing, or like
what am I excited about? So this year I taught an entrepreneurship class at USC. It's kind of funny because I took that same class 5 years ago. And so me and my business partner Harsh got to teach that class, and that
Yeah.
was very exciting. I really enjoyed like just you know it was a capstone class for computer science seniors
Mm.
who were interested in entrepreneurship,
Mm.
and we made them not build anything. But
Mm.
like you guys are engineers, you know how to build stuff, so we're not going to build anything.
Yeah.
But we made them talk to 100 potential customers.
Mm.
And so every week they'll talk to 10 customers. They'll come back and tell us kind of what they learned from talking to those customers and give us some feedback. And the rest of the class give us some feedback. And they were able to refine the business model. And just by doing that, like they got like customers, investments. So in the space of like a semester, like
Mm.
they really took their ideas like very far. And so that was like very exciting. So I think between the Angel Investor Network and just teaching entrepreneurship, like I
Yeah.
feel outside of like building movie analytics to
Yeah.
several million people a year, I'm really excited about just supporting entrepreneurs anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm excited to. I can just say like from a small experience that I think like once you start becoming a mentor or like like guiding, the young minds, you'll see this like so addictive. Like
Oh
there
yeah,
is,
totally.
it's just so much fun to. But I'm excited for you for what you're for what's coming next. So I guess like we're kind of like at the end of the of our like interaction. Do you have anything to say for the international students who might be like going through something which like or your younger self, like the younger Ade graduating?
I did still young, so
Yeah, that's true. Uh,
I think it's important to every time we're always thinking about
mm,
what are we supposed to be doing, right? What's our calling and stuff. And
yeah,
I think sometimes we overthink it, in terms of um, it's like what's my path? Am I supposed to be like a doctor or an engineer?
yeah,
And if you really kind of dig deeper, there's something that's inside you that's exciting. Yeah.
yeah,
And I encourage a lot of people to just explore that, right? Like sometimes like I think it's important to develop skills, right, that are valuable to the world. And
definitely.
then once you develop those skills, then try and find something that's exciting that you can work on that really kind of makes you come alive.
Mhm.
I think for international students, though, we're not always fortunate enough to have the liberty to do that stuff. I would
Yeah,
say, if I would encourage people to really maximize their OPT time to really explore kind of all the different things they can do. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of like my like just find something that you're really excited about and just try it.
yeah,
And like for me, I think about like when I was doing the first startup,
mm,
I knew I'm going to end up in healthcare.
yeah,
Right when it was failing, I thought like the world is going to end.
yeah,
And so just being where I am now, and like I can't even predict the future. I don't know what's going to come next. So I
yeah.
feel like you can't think too far.
Mm.
It's more like what are you excited about? What difference can you make in the world today? And just start there, and
Mm.
the rest will kind of figure out itself from there.
Yeah, yeah, and look, I completely agree, and um, yeah, I guess like if you are an international student, it, I believe that every international student is more or less like pretty smart by the process they came through US. So like as long as you have the optimism, you'll basically figure it out. Like that, there's no way that like you get stuck. But yeah, man, thanks a lot for taking your time of like sharing part of your story, part of your struggle with us. And like I wish you all the best for like I'm gonna track you more what you're doing and like hit me up if you ever visit New York. But best of luck with everything, man, and thank you.
Hey man, no, for sure. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for doing this. I think it's important to share stories, and a lot of times like I feel like we are we only dream what we've seen or what we've heard about. And so, it's very important that we showcase people who are doing interesting things so that other people kind of know that it's possible and
Yeah,
they can also dream. So I think that's I was very excited about what you're doing too. So we should definitely catch up properly.
yeah,
I'll let you know when I'm in New York so I can
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. And like we're all dreamers. We'll just, yeah, I'll see you around, and thanks a lot, man. Best of luck
All right,
with
Siam, take care. Bye bye.
it.